What do you do when a sneaky volcano emerges in the middle of Los Angeles? Well, you call up Tommy Lee Jones and he can scowl at the river of lava until the city is saved. We're deep in dumb cinema with this one, but that doesn't mean it won't be fun. Let's discuss Volcano. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter and joining me as always is David.
I'm not David. I'm Lava. What beats lava?
Tommy Lee Jones, hopefully. Welcome everyone. This is a movie podcast and we are working through 90s disaster season as we build up to the brand new sequel to a 90s disaster movie in that of Twisters. But this week we are doing the second of two 90s volcano, I should say the second of two 1997 volcano movies.
The second of two early 1997 volcano movies.
And this is, well, Volcano. It's just, it's called Volcano. There's no fancy name for this one. It's pretty straightforward. It's set in LA. The whole plot of this movie is that a secret dormant volcano, well, it was dormant anyway, wakes up. Wakes up?
It shoots up out of the ground. Maybe that's the up part, but yeah.
It emerges. That's a good word. That's
it
right.
erects.
It emerges throughout the ground beneath the La Brea tar pits, I want to say, is that location.
Yep.
So, yes, and lava flows through the streets of Los Angeles, and Tommy Lee Jones is the one man who, in an emergency, is given the power to control all of the city's resources, as the opening text lets us know, just in case we didn't...
You know, I was thinking about that opening text. I'm like, why is it, out of everything, out of all the volcano stuff in this movie that this movie takes the time to explain, did they have to specifically dedicate Tommy Lee Jones's job to the opening text? That couldn't have been explained in the movie. That had to have been separate entirely.
Well, what's funny is that I don't even feel like, as the movie goes on, is that knowing that at the start really mattered, because it just kind of feels like he's in the mix of it and people listen to him because he knows what he's doing. You know,
right.
It never really feels like he has to pull rank at any point and say, no, now that the city's in a dangerous, like, tragedy situation, I am now the one in charge. He never pulls that card, so it does not matter. This is an official thing.
This strikes me very much a producer note. They watched through the rough cut and they were like, so why did they let Tommy Lee Jones do so much? And then they just had to throw in a little title card because they didn't want to film anything new. Yeah,
I mean, just he's got OEM in the back of his jacket, right? People in the movie seem to understand what that is, and that's all that matters. I don't need to understand what it is. They understand this is the guy who runs the emergency situations, and that's what we're going to do. Simple enough. Anyway, that's the premise of Volcano. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. Before we get started, I'll just say, if you're enjoying the show, hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch. And of course, you can get some bonus shows every month from me and David, as well as some other bonus content over on Patreon. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. So yes, Volcano is a movie that I don't know if I saw it in theaters. If I didn't see it in theaters, I definitely saw it as soon as it hit, like, the movie channels, like, that year. Okay. Right, and I remember it being a new thing. I remember being in the theater and seeing, like, the stand up for it, like, and seeing, like, the big cardboard volcano and just, like, a tagline. And I remember someone saying it was a sequel to Twister, which it was not. People were just making weird connections where there were none.
That would have been a very interesting through line if it were a sequel, not like a spiritual sequel, but like actual characters. It's like, well, I'm glad to be out of that.
Bill Paxton's in LA thinking, oh, I'm glad we're away from those tornadoes. Luckily, other than the odd earthquake, nothing big happens in LA. Holy shit, there's a volcano.
Quick, drive your truck into it. Oops.
So, that's the basic. This was a thing that appealed to me when I was that age, and I have a bit of nostalgia for it. It's definitely a dumb movie. There is no question about that. There's things here, especially there's a few little things as well that the older I've gotten that I've picked up on that make it a little bit dumber or a little bit, I don't know, ill-advised at points. But we'll get into all the specifics as we go through the spoilers. But I don't believe you had seen this before. Is that correct?
parts of it seem very familiar. I feel like you were saying, the movie channels, I feel like I may have, between commercial breaks, caught this as it was airing on like TNT or something, but I don't think I've seen the whole thing stop to end at any point.
Yeah. Stop to end, that's a weird...
Start to end. Sorry.
Both those words mean the end.
Yes. I haven't ever turned it on during the ending credits and then turned it off soon afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm curious. I don't expect you're going to think it's high art, because, well, it isn't.
What do you mean? This movie had some of the deepest characterization this side of 1997.
Possibly better characterization than Dante's Peak. That's debatable. We'll compare them later. But regardless, I mean, it's more subtle. I'll say that, right? Because Dante's Peak starts with a whole, here's the character's dramatic tragedy. Right. Whereas there is kind of character arcs in this, and they're kind of just a bit more subtle, just to sort of say, oh, they have something, which is a bit thin, don't get me wrong. But it's not in your face like, oh, he lost a loved one and now he's like struggling to get back on the horse kind of thing.
Right.
But we're not doing that, so that's something. Anyway, David, what did you think of Volcano?
I really don't want to try to compare it to Dante's Peak, but like, it's kind of the only thing in mind. I did like this one more than that. Okay. And I think it's down to two reasons. I think there are two things that really work for this movie. One, it leans so much more into the silliness, and it knows it. It is well aware that it's playing it up to be silly. And I appreciate that. Does it mean that it takes away from some of the drama? Absolutely. But that's okay. You can do that. The second thing is, as with a lot of the 70s disaster seasons that we did, a lot of those movies felt like there was a fight. There was actually some sort of trying to survive and doing something that like required planning or required ingenuity or required something. Dante's Peak didn't really have that. This movie was all about that. This movie was 100%, we've done a plan, it did or didn't work, let's move on to the next thing because more crises just keep popping up. And I had fun with that. Even when it was trying to play it straight and it was being serious about it, I think that it was well done in the terms of it laid out everything you needed to then come up with this plan. It didn't just pull anything out of its ass at any point. So, is it good? No, not at all. But I enjoyed it.
That's fair. I think that's an apt description of Volcano. It's not a good movie. It's not high art, and I'm sure the science of almost everything that they do in this is nonsense. But like you say, they set up the simple ideas that they're going to use when they give their problems, so that when they try and solve the problems, they make sense in the logic of the movie, even if I'm sure actual geologists or whoever would be like, wait a minute, that's not going to quite work like that. I don't think
that's how that works.
But yeah, like there's definitely some like silly character moments and whatnot. It does move at a reasonable pace. I think the big thing for me is that Tommy Lee Jones is the perfect, just grumpy, dry asshole to be at the center of this. And I think you can tell he never cared about this project. He's here to star in a movie. He's getting a paycheck, and that's it. But that grumpiness works. He's such a likable grump, and I feel like that just kind of shines throughout this. We have obviously a whole host of faces here, actually. Most of them in small roles, either because they hadn't made it big yet or because they just kind of bounce between those types of roles. Anne Heche is kind of the... she's not the love interest. She's just the female lead. There's not a romance.
Yeah, it keeps straddling that line. Like, it feels like somebody behind the scenes really wanted to push it there, but it never did by the end.
Yeah, and it's right that it's not, because she is like half the age of Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah.
Like, if it just feels like a platonic friendship is formed rather than anything else. I actually just found out when I was looking her up that she died a couple of years ago in a car crash.
Yeah. That was crash into a house or something. I remember the headlines on that.
Yeah. And then we have Don Cheadle, who's like the second in command at the OEM office where Mike works. That's Tommy Lee Jones' character. His character gimmick is that he's always joking that he wants to take Tommy Lee Jones's job. So that's his thing, yeah.
pretty much.
There's another guy who works at that office who's a very minor role, right? It's a bald black guy, but he's in The Wire. He's like a fairly high ranking cop in The Wire. And it was just it was that thing where this is maybe the first time I've watched this movie since I've seen that show, and I was like, oh, I was in DiCaprio meme. I was like, him, I know him.
Yeah, that's fair.
Keith David shows up as a cop like halfway through.
As soon as I saw him, I was like, that guy looks vaguely familiar, but I'm not sure. And then he spoke, and I'm like, oh, it's Keith David. All right.
Yeah, but this is post the thing and They Live. Like he's done, some of his more well-known roles were before this, but he's just one of those actors that would take small roles as well and still has continued to do so. Yep. Michael Rispoli, who people might in recent years know from The Deuce, he tends to get typecast as a lot of like gangster characters, but he's like he works at the OEM as well. He's kind of he's like the man on the ground kind of. I don't know how to describe his role in this, but he's around. He
seems like the guy who goes out and actually does the stuff, because everyone else, they make it very clear it's very much an office position. It's very much something where you're supposed to sit at a desk and kind of direct manage like different emergency services. Whereas this guy and Tommy Lee Jones are very much of the, no, we're going to go out there and we're going to actually do stuff.
Well, no, to be fair, I think this guy named Gator, his name's Gator, what? But his name's Gator.
Yeah, nickname.
I think is supposed to be going out on the field. Tommy Lee Jones, they make it very clear, is not supposed to be going out in the field. He's just very hands-on and chooses to go out in the field. And it pisses everyone off that's higher up the ranks. We don't see these people, we just hear them, they're mad on the phone. That's basically all we ever get.
There's a running gag in this movie that the police chief desperately wants to talk to Tommy Lee Jones, and then he just keeps on having to deal with Don Cheadle instead. And I guess it's a joke, in the loosest sense of the word joke.
There's vaguely a joke in there. And then last sort of recognizable name I would say to mention is John Carroll Lynch, who plays like the head of like the subway system. Well, I mean, that's obviously not the name of the role, but whatever that role would be.
He's like, I think it's like transit authority or whatever. But
something like that. But that's his role. Otherwise, just in terms of characters, although I don't really know the actors particularly well, there's a doctor who's married to this kind of real estate guy who's just built like a high-rise tower. So,
for how much attention they were given in the first like 10 minutes of this movie as we were setting up characters, I expected them to be around doing stuff that actually mattered. My mistake.
I feel like there might have been some stuff cut out that
it feels like
shortchanged them, particularly the doctor, just because it felt like she was set up as a more sympathetic character that we'd root for throughout. But it kind of just all boiled down to one thing after a certain point in the movie.
Yep.
But that's the main bigger roles that I think I'd want to point out.
Well, I think the last one we definitely need to point out is Gaby Hoffmann, who plays the daughter of Tommy Lee Jones.
Oh, of course, I just glossed over her. Because she comes as a package deal. She comes with Tommy Lee Jones. I didn't even think about her. But you're right. He's got a supposedly 13-year-old daughter. I was like, I don't know if I buy she's 13.
Dude, same. So I looked it up. During filming, she was like 14, 15. So but it wasn't as far off as you think.
Yeah, but at that age, that's a big difference, though. Like,
oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Right, like I think that makes a bigger difference there than say like a 19-year-old playing a 17-year-old. I think 13 to 15, like the difference that one might go through in that age period is astronomical.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that when they cast her, she was probably 13, and then it just pre-production and all that stuff took place, and oops, now all of a sudden she's 14 years old.
Do you know the problem with it is that part of the start of the plot, Tommy Lee Jones has like arc with her is that he still sees her as a little kid to be protected, so he calls a babysitter. And I feel like they couldn't age her up a year or two to match her age because it would make that even more ridiculous if she was like 14, 15.
See, but I think if they really leaned into it, that she was like part of that age group, that she was 14, 15, it would make the overbearingness of Tommy Lee Jones come off even more. It would make that protective nature of him. Yeah,
I suppose there's something to be said there.
Where it falls apart is the fact that she acts like she's 11 the entire time.
She kind of does. Yeah.
Someone asks like, "Oh, can you like babysit or something like that?" And she's like, "I have to care for another child? What?" And it's like, you are about to start driving. Like that's within the next year for you.
teenagers in America start driving at 14?
No, I was talking about the actress age.
Oh, right, okay,
like
right, fair enough.
60.
I was like, all right, that's a bit early.
I mean, going to Dante's Peak, they start driving at 12.
Not legally.
Well, when have Americans cared about that?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is a little bit of an arc to be had, but yeah. So she's there to give us someone for Tommy Lee Jones to care about and like give him some humanity and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, I think the other big thing to talk about here is, when we talk about Dante's Peak, I said there wasn't a lot of lava, but we'd be getting our fill of lava on this movie, which we do. That said, though, the effects here are a lot more mixed. There's a lot more optical effects and a lot more kind of like dated looking shots in this one.
So there's one effect that they keep on doing that I don't know what the hell they were actually doing here. So one effect that they do is steam comes up, steam, fire, whatever you want to call it. Something very hot comes up from a fissure. And then they have a character react. And then they just play the footage in reverse. And I don't know whether or not that's implying the steam just dies off and disappears, or whether they're saying this steam actually gets sucked back down into the crack, because that's what it looks like, but that makes absolutely no sense to me.
I felt like they were saying it was sort of getting sucked back down somehow. I don't know why, or if that's... It doesn't seem like a real thing, but...
No, it doesn't. And that just goes with the special effects thing of it feels lazy. I think that every single special effect in this movie, barring a few of the lava shots, feels very much, how cheap can we do it? And they went with that. Yeah.
For the most part, I think they still have a bit of charm. Honestly, the only effects that really bothered me in this movie, as much as soft as the lava can look sometimes when it's more of a digital or optical effect, is towards the end, I won't spoil the context, but there's some really, really dodgy green screen of Tommy Lee Jones running as like big stuff's happening around him.
Yeah.
And it looks atrocious and is not aged well at all. To the point where it almost felt like the shot choices were kind of weird to try and get around it. They couldn't show this big thing happening like clearly and properly, and it kind of like almost felt like it was like pointing out, hey, here's what we can't do, in the way they shot it. So I think that's maybe worth mentioning. But so I mean, Dante's Peak, like, I'll give it the props where it's due. It has more consistent, better practical effects because they're very consistent in that movie. But I still had more fun with this one.
Oh, absolutely. It's, again, it goes back to something I said in the Dante's Peak review, which is the Dante's Peak felt like it was something where the special effects artists and like the people who were tasked with making stuff realistic regarding the volcano were the ones that really had a lot of sway. This one feels like the screenwriters are the ones who want the drama and want the impact and want the lava to essentially be a sentient beast that is able to screw over everybody. They're the ones who had the shots called here. Well,
to be fair, they do at least... There's some simple physics it does follow. Obviously, I'm not arguing the realism of a lot of it, but there's just a simple idea of, the road starts to go downhill to the side here, so the lava's going to flow that way. That simple enough makes some sense, okay? Makes some sense.
I'm not saying they invent new physics at every given point here.
And sometimes they do, but...
But I think that in any given shot, they're trying to figure out what's going to cause more drama. And the only time that the road sloping a different way matters is when it's going to cause more drama.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, yeah. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're writing. You don't just have it randomly happen for no reason. You do it when it's going to up the stakes.
Well, yeah. Obviously, but somehow Dante's Peak felt like it just gave, maybe it was just because it was more bland overall, but it just felt like everything that happened felt real and reasonable. Whereas, like I said, this feels like the lava is alive. The fact that one of the first explosion is more of just spewing out molten rocks, and every single one of those rocks hits a person. I don't think a single one lands just on the ground anywhere.
Yes, the lava here is kind of like the ooze from Ghostbusters 2. It's got a mind of its own.
Feeds off of LA's bad energy.
Yeah, Alan Silvestri did the music for this, the score, which it doesn't stand out to me as being a particularly amazing score. That said, though, when I started watching the movie, that little like theme that plays at the start, as it's like doing like a sort of montage of like, oh, here's here's the morning in the city. Here's all these different people we're going to be following as the day goes on. Like, that music did come back to me as soon as it started playing. Right, it's got a bit of a mystery kind of quality to it, and then, I did not expect Randy Newman coming in for the end credits. I'll say that much. With a song which, when I looked it up, is literally just "I Love L.A." or something like that. It's
Oh yeah, no, it sounded awful and completely out of place.
yeah. So let's celebrate Los Angeles. So it's like, yeah, okay, whatever.
I feel like we should have gotten a more triumphant tone instead of Newman.
Oh dear. But yeah, I mean, it's that. I mean, that's pretty much everything I would want to say before we get to spoilers. I don't know if you get anything you want to add.
Not really. I think one of the other major falling down points of this movie is that they do a lot of work with Tommy Lee Jones and Heche and the daughter character. But I think all of the other characters that they spend a decent amount of time introducing during the opening, like 20, 30 minutes of this, all of them are either killed very quickly or just shunted off to the side. It doesn't feel like they are actually, like, they serve maybe 1-2 scenes purpose and then they're just forgotten about. They aren't something that is developed over the course of the movie like the main characters are.
Yeah, I think that's either a case of they cut a bunch of scenes to like get it down to like a tight, 100 minutes, which is what it is. Because, I mean, Tower Inferno, if you remember, was like 2 hours and 40 minutes. They could easily have like ballooned to that size if they wanted to give all these subplots like time. Alternatively, I could maybe look at it more like a slasher movie where you've got a bunch of side characters whose purpose is, will they die or not? And then some of them will get their death, some of them will not. And that's it.
Yeah.
They're not any more important than that. But, which is not to defend it by any means. I'm just kind of spitballing the logic behind it. So, so the spoilers, we'll get into it. We'll talk through the movie. The movie starts with, like I say, a little kind of mysterious, like, almost ominous, mysterious, but kind of also light at the same time bit of music as we just hear news reports about the beautiful morning in LA, and we see people around. Someone's blowing some leaves off their lawn. Some people are at the gym. The whole bunch of things, right? Just very LA stuff.
I hope for anybody watching this movie that you like news reports and like the exposition being delivered via news report, because let me tell you, it never stops. And throughout this entire movie, I don't think they go more than 5 minutes without cutting to, standing here in front of literal lava, Jim.
There's a lot of it. I mean, I kind of like this in a weird way because it really gives this vibe of like something that affects the whole city. So so starting off the movie with like what a normal news report day is, where it's just like, oh, here's some fluff pieces, here's the weather for the morning, it's a beautiful day, blah 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 blah. It just contrasts nicely later on with like all this is happening, 3 people are dead, like this boulevard's on fire, like what whatever we're doing later.
I don't know. There's a couple of, I don't want to say aborted because they do kind of try to deal with it, but there's a couple of aborted themes and messages that I feel like show up, and I feel like the news thing was one of those. I feel like it was trying to say something about like the news networks and how they're putting all this like human suffering on the front lines for entertainment or whatnot, but it never quite delivered on that, and it just felt more like the exposition device more than anything else.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever were trying to say anything with that stuff. I mean, maybe you're right, but I just never got that vibe.
The only thing that kind of hinted on that is that there are 2 different, I wouldn't even say plots. There's one plot and then one scene at the very end of this movie that I guess we were doing a thing on racism the whole time, which I get in LA in the 90s. That's like a big deal, but the movie was not handling that well.
No, that's separate from the news report things, though. Like, that's something we'll talk about when we get to it, but that's separate from that point.
Oh, yeah, but that's just one of those things that I feel like they were trying to make like a general message about, but it just didn't end up showing up. And I feel like the news is on that same sort of level where they were just doing enough in the beginning that it felt like it was supposed to draw attention to it.
I mean, it's weird because I felt like the racism stuff was more just like, this is going to sound like a weird way of putting this, but it almost felt like propaganda for the city, where it's
absolutely.
hey, we know some bad things have happened in the area over the past few years, but we're going to try and solve it. You know, it's almost like they tried to insert like a little subplot from the Oscar bait Crash movie into the middle of their disaster. Obviously, that hadn't happened yet, but like into a little bit of their disaster movie, and it's something that I didn't notice until this viewing because I didn't really know that much about this stuff until this, you know, like the last time I watched it. So it's just interesting. But anyway, we'll get to it when we get to those characters.
Right.
They get introduced later. I mean, I think we do technically introduce some of them early on, but we'll just come back to them when they're more properly involved later.
Yeah, because again, like I said, they're introduced for like 1 scene, 2 scenes, and then they're gone. So it's very easy to point out where exactly in the movie they fit in.
Yeah. So the big thing that gets the movie going though is a little earthquake, right? A little earthquake. We meet Tommy Lee Jones, who's got his daughter with him. Turns out she doesn't live there permanently. She's there for like a week or whatever from her mother, and he's supposed to be taking a week off to spend time with his daughter.
Can we add to the tally of guys on vacation real quick? We're up to 2 of 2.
Well, that was. Do you know what? It's funny. I even think of that one. The one that was getting me was, basically that the idea that Tom, and it's not as specific as Dante's Peak, but the way that he's like, hey, let's shut down the subway lines here and here, and everyone's like, hey, nah, there's no reason to like play this safe. There's no signs that anything's wrong. It's like this trope of like the main character being like, no, I think something might be happening. We should play it safe, and then everyone else be like, don't be ridiculous. Like that'll cost us all money. Like no, we have to keep going.
There's no way the shark's gonna attack again. Come on.
Well, lightning doesn't strike twice like that. Come on.
Nah.
And this coincides soon enough with MacArthur Park, I think was the name of the name.
Yes.
The park. But there's like a sort of like maintenance hatch going into the sewer system where all the power cables and gas lines are and all that. And this like guy comes out in like a suit, like a hazmat suit, crawling and like he's half burned. He's actually like Two-Face. Like when his head turns at the end.
That's what I said.
He's straight up got a Two-Face burn. But all of his team are dead. There was like 7 guys down there. He's the only one who came back up, and like shit, this is dangerous. So this gets the attention of Tommy Lee Jones. It gets the attention of everyone, and so on. Tommy Lee Jones as well goes into work because of the earthquake, and his daughter's like, "You promised, Mum, you were taking the week off." And he's like, but there was an earthquake." He's like, and even Don Cheadle, when he phones him, because Don Cheadle's already at the office, he's like, "Mike, this was like a mild earthquake by LA standards. This is not cancel your vacation plans level of stuff here. What's going on?"
I love how he comes in and Mike is like going around the room. He's making sure everybody's on task and everyone has already got it handled. Don Cheadle's already taken care of everything. He's like, well, all right, guess I'll leave. But that's where the call comes in about the burn guys. So he's like, haha, I've got something to do. Don't have to spend time with my daughter.
Yep. So he goes down. And he goes down with his buddy, well, I say buddy,
Gator.
co-worker, with Gator, and they go down in like sort of like fireman's jackets and like gas masks to like check it out and see what's going on. And sure enough, they get to this sort of crack in the sewer system that's got like, you know, it's hot. They're taking readings and it's like hitting absurd degrees. And then, of course, there's more like tremors or whatever. Actually, no, this one's not a tremor because they say, "Is this a tremor?" And he's like, "No, we're next to the subway. This is just the train car going by." But it's like, okay, this is pretty serious down here. Something's going on, and he wants to shut down like this metro line under this part of the park. And Lynch is like, "Hey," and which, by the way, Lynch's introduction was that him and all the other metro guys were taking bets after the earthquake. As to where in California or the LA area the epicenter was, and they're kind of waiting with bated breath. And I do think this is fairly well done, and that this links in with how the other characters are introduced over at the wherever Anne Hirsch works, like whatever that department is.
The seismologists, they're all just geologists. They're freelancers.
The scientists, because her friend and co-worker is going to have to give the news report, the press briefing about the earthquake, and she's shitting herself because she doesn't like doing that. And then Anne Hirsch comes in at the last second. He's like, "Oh, I'm here. I'll do it." Yeah. So
no, I mean, we kind of basically glossed over. Well, not glossed over. We got through everything that's in this intro, but I do want to say this intro is actually really, really good at introducing all of these various characters and making it feel like a nice intertwining thing. Yeah. Where it doesn't feel like we're stopping and then switching over to another character. It's a flow of scenes where they're talking about the new subway line in one of the scenes. So we get introduced to this billionaire guy. And then we switch over to the subway guys placing bets, and then we switch over to the geologists as they're about to answer. And it does it very fluid to get through all the different characters that we're going to kind of meet.
Yeah, it goes from the billionaire who's rallying against them building the subway line out past where his new high-rise building is because it's noisy and it creates whatever. Like, he's basically got a bunch of bullet points. And then from there you go to the actual metro guys who are working on the line and watching the earthquake news, which then goes into like, okay, here's Anna Heche, she's going to deliver the news. Goes back to the metro guys as one guy wins because he had the right district or whatever. Like, you know, it goes through but all the way through it and back again in a way that flows well enough, you know? Yeah. And then likewise, when like the next earthquake hits, like the survivor who came up from the steam vent thing, like he's on the operating table with the doctor lady that we've been, you know, or this may even be her introduction actually, now that I'm thinking about it. That's maybe the first time we see her is when she's at the hospital doing this stuff.
Yeah, we get her briefly. There's a hospital shot where some guy comes in with gunshot wounds, and that's where the very first tremors happen. But it's like a blink and you'll miss it sort of scene.
Yeah, so she has one more scene after that where she goes to the new high-rise, which isn't finished yet, but like, you know, all the interior still need to get done. But she's like, oh, you did it, honey. And the billionaire's like, aha, yes, my high-rise. I can look out over the city. And this is our dream. We'll live in this penthouse. And by the way, stop being a surgeon to filthy poor people. I don't like you touching those filthy people.
Did you ever watch the new Wonka movie?
No, of course I didn't.
No. All right, that's fair. That's fair. I ended up watching it yesterday, shortly after I watched this one, actually. And there's a character in that who is, you know, a stereotype of rich people, and apparently he gets ill. Like, he starts to do like the gagging noise every time someone says the word poor, and that's all I could think of for this billionaire character. Just like, oh yes, you're treating those poor people.
Yes.
Like,
to be fair, this first time he just says, I don't want you treating strangers with gunshot wounds, but later on he starts just saying, these people are strangers, you're going to put your life in your line for this filth? Like, he gets more overt as the movie goes on. And all I could think was, like, how did you end up marrying this asshole? Like, you clearly care about people. You're a dedicated doctor who wants to be on the front line saving people every chance you get. And this asshole is just a money-making, scheming prick. Like,
well, she really thought she could last out the 5 years for the prenup.
That's it. Hey, maybe it's been 5 years. Maybe that's it. Maybe she's
exactly. She timed it right down. She's like, wow, Volcano goes off on the day. How convenient.
The Volcano represents her heart. The Volcano is just their marriage breaking up. That's all this is. Yeah.
Turns out Tommy Lee Jones has nothing symbolic to do with it. It's about their marriage. That's what the movie's really about.
Yeah, so obviously he's concerned, and as soon as they come up and they got this, because they see some steam coming out of it, right? And they're like, shit, this is like super intense. And they're like, he's like, get me a scientist. I need to know what's going on down there. Get me someone who can explain this to me.
I love it because this is the first time that it feels like the lava is sentient, because the steam chases them down the tunnel and they like try to slam the door, and then it does that thing where like it pops open a little bit and they have to slam it shut again. I'm like, oh, so it's just a slasher movie where they're trying to like get in through the door. Got it.
Yeah. Maybe more of a monster movie, actually, because especially once the lava's out in the street, because it's just this big monster that's sort of coming after them slowly.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. But this gets us introduced to Anne Heche. We also see John Carroll Lynch again, and he's like, I don't care until you give me proper evidence. There's no evidence. There's nothing to suggest that there's any reasons why those lines aren't safe, so they're staying open. Which maybe is also why he feels guilty later on, and makes a point of trying to save everyone on a train. So we'll get to that. Yeah. I think one of the little things that was sticking out to me was like the bouncing back and forth between Tommy Lee Jones and Anne Heche, particularly in this first scene where they're together, because she comes to his office and she's arguing with the other guy, but then when he leaves and they have a bit of sort of small talk, and she's like, so, and he's like, so, and then there's a pause, and then he just goes, so, and he says it again as if he's like, right, that's like, you're here for a reason. What the hell's happening with that park? Come on now, let's go down there and have a look at it. But she wants to go down and actually take some readings, right? And he's like, not too dangerous, not happening, not doing it. And it kind of like does this little thing where her friend kind of asks like a bunch of questions about the interaction, and she just kind of says, "Oh, so you kind of like each other then? Like you clearly have respect for him, even though you're clashing over this. You clearly understand where he's coming from."
And again, it's looking at how the movie played out. It obviously is just a friendship thing, but because they had that so thing back and forth, followed up almost immediately by this, it really felt like they were gonna try to play the romance angle sooner rather than later.
Yeah, but no. I would argue the second time he said "so" was not like flirting. It was so. Come on now, get to work.
Absolutely. You could see it in his face. I think he even says like, "So, you got something sciencey for me?"
I like the idea.
He follows up with that.
That last "so" was actually him saying it to the director. I'm like, okay, is that the take? Are we done? Can I go to lunch now?
Yeah.
Now she also explains here what might be causing this, and she's like, oh yeah, like, sometimes tectonic plates shift, and every so often there'll be a fissure and lava will come up through. And her friend jumps in and says, hey, there's this story about 1,000 years ago where there was a farmer in like New Mexico or something, and like after a bit of steam coming from a crack in the ground, and a week later there was a 1,000 feet high volcano. And I'm like, if you wanted to ease him into believing whatever theory you're going to give out, I don't know if telling him that story was going to be it.
I love and hate this scene, because obviously this is the, we don't believe the scientists. The scientists said this was coming and we're just rejecting them because it sounds so silly. But at a certain point, maybe this is only with like modern knowledge, access to the internet and whatnot. Someone like Tommy Lee Jones, as old as he was, but like they say magma comes up. And they have Tommy Lee Jones earnestly deliver the line, what's magma? And then the other girl says lava. And lava he knows. Lava is a word that's like totally familiar to him. That's lava in L.A.
What's so weird though is I saw this when I was 8 years old, so I have no doubt in my mind I know that magma is lava because of this movie.
And that's the thing I'm wondering, is like how much of it is like things that moved into the public consciousness after the fact, and how much of it is just we don't trust the audience to know what magma is.
I genuinely don't know. I saw it when I was 8, so I really can't judge like if that was a ridiculous line or not.
It just struck me that same sort of tone of like the early 2000s movie when they're trying to explain something technological with like chat rooms or something, where it comes off just completely condescending to the audience. Yeah,
but they decide that they're just going to sneak down and check it when all the cops are gone, which means, like midnight or something like that, early morning.
Like 4 a.m. they were going to meet up.
I want to say it's a bit earlier than that, because like the movie's still dark for a long time, like after that, before it gets light. So I feel like it must be like 2 o'clock or something like that.
Okay. I thought I just remembered the line 4 a.m., but...
Oh, yeah, maybe they said that and I just missed it. Yeah. That said, though, I have no idea what time it gets light in LA, admittedly.
I mean, depends on the time of the year, depends on how much smog's in the area.
But I guess technically, since they're closer to the equator, so they would...
I don't think it matters.
Does it not?
At a certain point. I mean, if you're below the polar, what are those, the tropics or whatever, I think that's where it's not going to matter whether or not you're north or south anymore.
Yeah, I know, but like I would assume that they have longer days than I'm used to because they're further south, but I don't know.
I'm just looking up here. In the middle of December, so in the latest possible
the
time...
opposite. They'd have shorter days, sorry. They'd have shorter days than I would.
So at the latest possible time, which is December, the sunrise happens at 7 a.m. So you can get a good 2 hours out of that, completely pitch black.
That's the latest in the middle of winter?
Yes. And I don't know when this movie took place, so...
Well, it's LA, so it's hard to tell.
Right.
They don't mention anything Christmassy, so I don't think it's... I bet it's summer. I bet this is meant to be summer.
Probably. Yeah, probably. In which point it's going to be, like 6 a.m. instead. But, you can still get an hour or two of pitch black out of that.
Wait, that's the difference? It's only an hour different between the height of summer and the height of winter?
Yeah. That's what happens when you get that far south. It doesn't really change that much time of year.
That is wild to me, because... height of winter, it gets dark at 4 p.m. Height of summer, it gets dark at 10 p.m.
Dude, when I visited you in Scotland, I was completely baffled with when the sun set. Like, it didn't make any damn sense to me.
Oh, it shifts wildly. And because it's such a big wide range, you can actually kind of like, you can almost like sort of roughly guess what time of year it is based on what time the sun's set at, because it's like as soon as you hit the longest day of the year where it's sunny for the longest, you can almost like sort of like every week track like how much it's changed since that day.
That's crazy to me. That's insane.
Because inherently it's changing by a couple of minutes, like, you know,
like every
day pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. Only an hour difference between. Oh, that's. I mean, it makes sense because obviously the opposite end of the spectrum is Alaska, where it's like, you know, 3 months of darkness and 3 months of sunlight. But still, anywho, for more on that, check out our review of Christopher Nolan's Insomnia, which we did last year.
We did,
and it was daylight the whole time.
Yes, that's the point of the movie.
Or you can watch True Detective Night Country for a show set in Alaska when it's nighttime the whole time.
Pete, are we talking about Volcano, or are we just pitching stuff here? Because
I don't know. I'm bringing up the examples of things I know set in Alaska. Okay.
All right, fair enough.
Oh dear. Anyway, so yeah, they sneak down and they're they look a bit more prepared in the sense that they've got like more hazmat flame suits. It's like they look really like, oh, you look like you're like scientists that are prepared for like the dangers down here.
Yeah.
Not that it helps when her friend gets sucked into the crevice and so the steam almost comes up and consumes her and like sucks her in. You just see like a hand like in the steam for a minute.
I loved this shot where they show her like trying to get a temperature reading on what is clearly ridiculously hot. And she's like, her legs spread on either side of the crevice, just like jamming her arm down in there. It's like, okay, honey, you're just asking to die now. That's not... You don't get to live through this scene anymore.
Yeah, Anne Heche barely makes it out. In fact, by the time she gets out, so much other stuff's happened. She kind of comes crawling out like the manhole later, and she's just sort of like sweaty. People are looting stuff. And my favorite little detail is that someone loots her backpack when she puts it down for a second.
It's like 2 seconds. She sets it on the truck, and someone just goes yoink and runs away.
And I'm like, it's an empty tank of oxygen. Like, what the hell are you going to do with it? Like,
Look, when you're looting, you just grab whatever you see.
Like, I get getting an electronic from the store that's in a new box, and it's like, oh, if nothing else, you could probably sell it on eBay. Maybe not in well, no, eBay did exist in 1997, but it wasn't as widely used, I don't think. But regardless, you could sell it somewhere. You know, Craigslist or whatever existed in the day.
I mean, there's so many things that died in that first .com bubble. I don't know what it would have been back then, but I'm sure there was some marketplace online.
Oh, it's wild. There's something really kind of almost perversely fascinating to me about watching people in movies pre-2000 use computers, like, and just how they interact with them, what level of internet access. But my favorite thing, which doesn't really show up in this movie, admittedly, but my favorite thing is when the computers can control things that even today they can't control, but they'll just say they can, and because like, oh, people think computers are fancy and high tech, we'll just say it can do this, and no one will question it.
I mean, my favorite is in that same sort of vein. Whenever a hacker gets into a computer and they're able to just like somehow close some wooden doors on the other side of the house or something, it's like, I'm sorry, what? You had all this wired up?
Oh dear. I mean, maybe there's smart houses today where you could technically do that. Maybe.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Motorized doors, definitely.
But probably only the front, like the outside doors, though. I don't imagine the interior doors are ever hooked up to that.
I mean, I'm not even more so talking about how it is modern day. I'm talking about how unlikely it was back in 1990.
Oh no, obviously, yeah, that was ridiculous back then. But I'm saying that even by today's standards, it's still a bit far fetched. Some of it, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but at this point in the movie, though, Tommy Lee Jones is like, okay, just accepting that he can't do much. He goes home to his daughter. The daughter did have like a brief scene with her quote unquote babysitter, who and it is ridiculous. I mean, even at 13, this like I was being left on my own at like 10 or 11. Like I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was around then.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, being left alone in the house, no biggie, whatever. It's like all you have to do is trust they won't burn the house down, and you're good.
I will throw a little bit of credit their way, is that they specifically say that he moved here from like Oklahoma or some like Midwestern place. And to go from the you can leave your doors unlocked areas of Oklahoma to LA, specifically downtown LA, I get why they'd be a bit more cautious and scared of being like left home alone.
It was Missouri and St. Louis, and the only reason why I remember
what it
that is because someone says you're not in Kansas anymore, and he's like, I'm not in Missouri anymore. That's the only reason why I remember that, where he came from.
Yep, you're right.
So, well, the reason why he was probably so hands-on in Missouri is because it's, you know, I'm sure it's still a relatively big city, but I've got a feeling like, this was like a one-man department when he was doing it in a smaller city. He was just doing everything on his own. He had like maybe one assistant who helped him, and that was it. Not this whole department of people with computers.
He had an actual gator as his buddy cop.
He rode in on the gator to work every day, like a skateboard.
He was so much cooler when he was in Missouri.
But you know, it takes a lot out. You try to take care of a gator like that every day. So eventually it caught up with him. He got offered the big job in LA. So, I mean, does Missouri even get earthquakes? Like,
No. Missouri is almost... I mean, hold on. I'm going to look at a map first before I say something stupid.
Is it in tornado country? Is that what you're going to say?
I was going to say it's close enough to, like, the coast, but I'm definitely wrong. I'm thinking of Mississippi. Missouri is definitely tornado country.
Okay. All right. Well, that's maybe it is a secret sequel to Twister. This is like,
there you go.
Oh, you get moved here, and now this is the sort of disasters he's dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the big earthquake hits when Anne Heche and her friend are down taking readings, because they're down there when this big earthquake hits, and we cut to a shot of the Richter scale going nuts, you know, just like
I mean, I think it does a good job of, it shows specifically like how strong the tiny quake was and how much of like a ripple it was on the thing, and then it shows you how huge these ripples are on the seismograph or whatever it's called.
That's the word I was looking for. I just said, I mean, it is the Richter scale technically, but not the device itself is not the Richter scale. So, like, he wakes up, the daughter wakes up, and he's like protecting her. She didn't have a good line earlier, actually. But the line that made him call a babysitter is when he was going to leave her on her own, and he's like, "Hey, if an earthquake hits, you know what to do, right?" And she's like, "Yeah, go between the door frame and kiss your ass goodbye."
That is solid.
So, this of course, like, he's like, "Oh, something's going on. This was a big earthquake. We have to go and check things out." So he puts her in the car. He gets in the car and he's driving to work effectively. But of course,
there's a power outage all over LA at this point.
But of course, he never makes it. In fact, he ends up just getting involved on the way there, and that's it. He's now involved in the actual tragedy the entire time. Because as they're going near the tar pits, the manholes start flying open and steam's shooting them up, and it's a whole...
Batman's going overhead in the metro, fighting Ra's al Ghul.
That's actually what it looks like, funnily enough.
Yeah,
that's what it looks like when the whatever the MacGuffin device was in Batman Begins that was turning the water into vapor.
The microwave emitter.
There you go. Yep. You remembered it. So yeah, like, because there's like fire trucks on their way to a fire, and one of them just gets hit with like, well, he calls it a meteor when he's describing it, and to be fair, that's what it kind of looks like in a way. Yeah.
No, it definitely, it's just hot rocks falling from the sky for all they care. So yeah, meteor makes sense here. I was laughing more at the fact that this movie, for a while, almost goes the zombie movie route, where like they're trying so many other words until they eventually finally say it's lava from a volcano. Like, it takes a good 10-15 minutes before they accept that that is the case here.
Do you think that's just them trying to sell this idea that it's so unbelievable? Like, no one would have ever thought a volcano would pop up in the middle of LA.
I think so. I think that's what they were going for, because that's, as soon as they show, like, the OEM office gets a visual of it, every single person there's like, what's that? What's going on? It's like, that's a volcano. Have you never seen a volcano before? It's never been on TV?
I don't know. Had it been on? Like, was there a lot of like Icelandic eruptions that were being documented back in the?
Even if there
90s?
Weren't a lot, I feel like any one of them.
True.
Maybe I'm just privileged as a kid, where I grew up like as I had the capability to go online and see whatever I want at any given point. But I feel like seeing a volcanic explosion is something that should have been available at least since like the dawn of cinema. Even if it was fake, you'd be able to see it.
Yeah. Again, maybe you could just sell the shock. It's like they're not confused by what it is. They're just in awe that it is what it is. They're just like, wait, what? How? We didn't train for this.
That's fair.
We're in California. We didn't train for volcanoes. Oh. So, yeah, there's a lot of chaos here. Is like Tommy Lee Jones is trying to help firefighters out of the trucks, and sort of the doctor lady was also driving here, so she's like sort of running around trying to help them, and this is kind of where everything converges. Now, the daughter was told to stay in the car, and this is important because lava, once it starts flowing out, is actually crawling towards the car and actually hits the back tires, and she like sort of gets out and she's like, oh no, what do I do? And I will say, I do get frustrated watching her specifically in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because she repeatedly just stands there frozen still and needs Tommy Lee Jones to come and rescue her when literally all she has to do is run a bit. just run towards him. That's all you need to do right now.
There's a point when Tommy Lee Jones gets a call from his ex-wife, and you can hear her side of the conversation where she's bitching him out for saying, like, how dare you leave her alone with the babysitter, blah, blah, blah. And she says the line, you know how she gets. She always freezes up.
They try and set it up. That's fair.
They do try to set, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating that after all of the stuff that the character's gone through in this movie, that they can't learn how to move. Like, just for God's sakes, take 3 steps back and everything will be fine.
Yep. And it comes up again later, because she does kind of go through an arc, but annoyingly she still freezes at the end, which is like, and admittedly, she has less options there because what's happening is a lot harder to run from. But here the lava is moving so slowly until, of course, it gets to the point where this like telephone pole or whatever it is falls down and sort of like pins her in, where in front of her there's like a pole that's on fire, which has created a wall of flames. The lava's coming from behind, and then the car's there. So Tommy Lee Jones has to do like an action slide across the car, and like he's like, I've got you, baby, I've got you. And he picks her up, right? Again, like she's a little kid. Like she's big enough to like move herself, but he picks her up, and at this point, like the lava's getting closer and closer. There's more fire spreading around. So he just has to kind of like run and jump onto the top of the front of the car and then jump off of it. And it actually does it in a little bit of slow motion as he jumps off, which felt a little bit cheesy. It's like they were trying to make it feel like a bigger action moment than it actually was. But it was fine. It's a nice, like, this idea of like, okay, lava's coming, and much like a zombie movie, because zombies move slow, they're going to be in situations where they're kind of pinned and they have to like get inventive to how to get out of the moment. That's fine. But there's definitely a couple of situations here where it's just because the character is just inept and just doesn't do anything.
Well, that's the thing, is that her character during this whole sequence, she gets targeted by the volcano and she gets a little bit of a burn on her leg.
Yes.
And from this scene onward, she's essentially removed from the lava. She no longer has to deal with the lava anymore. She's punted off to the other side of town, and we'll get back to her later. But it's frustrating because she's given her development plot while she's on the other side of town, and it doesn't feel like it ever amounts to anything. By the end of the movie, she doesn't feel like she's grown at all. It just feels like...
It almost does, though. That's the thing. When we get to the end, and we'll talk about how it almost does. If she just actually did something proactive at the very end, it would have felt like a conclusion to an arc. But instead... Anyway, so yeah, how she gets burned though, I kind of like though, because it makes me think of like when you're frying something, you get a bit of spittle, like a bit of spittle comes up and hits you. This happens from one of the volcanic rocks where once it's landed, it spits like a bit of fire at her, so she gets a little bit of fire on her leg.
I have a scar right on my elbow from a molten piece of marshmallow that I was cooking one time, so I can relate. It hurts a lot.
Oh, I thought you meant recently. This was just like an old thing that's lingered.
I mean, it's been like 2 years now. It's still very visible where it was.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Damaged goods.
Don't mess around with molten marshmallow.
I feel like maybe the definition of molten would extend to this, but I don't know if I would describe a marshmallow as molten, no matter how much you're cooking it.
Look, I want to have my cool story, and there's only so far I could stretch marshmallow without, like, making it stupid. So I'm going to call it molten to give it that extra edge.
I'm not, like I say, I've not looked up the exact definition of molten, but when I think of molten, I think of effectively lava, right?
Yeah.
But like, you know, like man-made lava where they're, you know.
It was 700 degrees Fahrenheit, probably.
I don't think it was. I don't think that's what you're cooking stuff at, David. Just a thought.
Anywho, but no, I like what you were saying there, though, is, yeah, it does feel like it is just this little, like, it was almost unavoidable the way that it exploded out, and it was still technically targeting her in a way that kind of annoyed me that goes throughout the movie, but it was just a nice little thing where, you know, she wasn't actually just hit by a meteoric rock or anything like that.
No. But this is where Tommy Lee Jones is like, hey, doctor lady, that's like putting some of these like firefighters that are injured in her car. She's like, hey, take my daughter as well. Take her to the hospital over in the different side of the city. Get her treated, please. And they exchange business cards so they can like contact each other later. And he's like, because the doctor lady's like, hey, you're OEM. You need to be here. This is dangerous for her, but you need to be, like, this is your job. And she's like, no, Dad, like, take me home. And he's like, honey, this is my responsibility. And she's like, but so am I. And obviously that's kind of like Tommy Lee Jones' character arc in the movie, if you could even call it that, but is the idea that, you know, he does prioritize this. And to be fair, this disaster does actually call for all hands on deck, right? We're definitely at that stage. But he does, at least at the end of the movie, decide to take the vacation and spend it with his daughter. Although I've got a funny feeling Disneyland's closed, based on the events of the movie.
I mean, I don't think Disneyland is in LA. I don't know where
it's not, but like, you really think theme parks are open in like the neighboring places after this?
I mean, California's big, is what I'm saying. I'm not sure how close it is to, hold on, Anaheim to LA. That's an hour away. It's an hour south. I think it's feasible. I think they might be closed for the day, but I think that later on in the week they'd be fine.
Not knowing Disney, they'd be tasteless and have some sort of like volcano themed things going on the next day.
Hey everybody, we're so sorry you've been displaced. How about you come to Magic Mountain? Oops.
We've got a big chocolate volcano at the entrance to welcome everyone.
Yep. Everyone can come stay at our tiki resort, but be careful. Every 5 minutes the volcano goes off. Oops. And by the way, I do know that Magic Mountain is Six Flags, but I needed something that worked. That's
fine. There is a mountain ride at Disneyland. I can't remember what it's called though.
It's like a Himalaya sort of thing. Yeah.
So where are we? Right. So Tommy Lee Jones is staying there. He's starting to like be a man of action. He's like, okay, this lava's coming down the street. We have to start doing things. They're moving people out the way. One of the first big things that he's going to do, especially once Heche shows up, is this idea that he wants to try and flip a bus to try and redirect the lava. Now, admittedly, it doesn't really achieve all that much, but it is just kind of like a test, effectively. But he gets a bunch of people to help, and like, he gets like I felt like one cop with a couple of shots in each tire would have done. Instead, he gets a line of like 9 cops to all take out their handguns and all fire at the tires of this bus on one side.
This is mid-90s LAPD. They went around, they saw those tires were black, and they had their day.
Oh, bloody hell. So they flipped this bus, but of course, at the last second, Tom Lee Jones notices like an unconscious man who, because keep in mind, there's like ash snowfall, like basically throughout the entire movie once the volcano starts. So people are, and I actually like this detail actually, because later on when they're looking at plans on like a truck, like the edges of the map are all covered in ash already. Like everything's getting covered very quickly.
I have to imagine this was the most annoying shoot to be on.
Very possibly.
Like every single day, just ash. Did you get ashed up? Here you go.
Would it be more or less annoying than everything being in water, though? Probably slightly less, I'd imagine, but
I don't know. It depends on how easily it is to get the ash off of you at the end of the day.
I suppose. I'm just thinking, well, water, obviously just water, it's not a big deal. If you're just in it the whole time, though, that could be frustrating. Because at least here you can still go to the bathroom easily. You can still just run off and do that. But he notices this unconscious guy, and the lava's almost about to hit him, so Tommy Lee Jones is the hero. So he runs in to get him, and Anne Heche goes in as well. But of course, just like before with his daughter, a telephone pole or whatever knocks over on fire and traps them in this sort of like triangle with the bus, the pole, and the lava. So the only hope they've got is that there's a fire truck with their big, the big crane, the big ladders out, and they're like, oh, let's swivel that around. So they lower that and over the flames. They put the guy on it like a stretcher almost, and then those two hang on to it, and they try and pick it up, but it's, oh, this is too heavy. There's too many people on it, so I can't like bring the ladder back in. We have to swing it around.
Fire hose is on fire, like creeping its way up the ladder.
So. If I'm going to critique this, is that I didn't get the impression from the shots that they'd swiveled around enough to be out of away from the lava when they finally fell. Because they fall and they're just like, oh, they're in front of the lava. That's good now. But alternatively, what they could have done is that when they realized the ladder wasn't going to hold for a bit, they could have had someone just jump in the driver's seat of the fire truck and just drive 15 feet as quickly as possible, just to like get them out from the lava. That'd have been maybe a fun bit.
I mean, I think obviously this has to come from a point of suspense. It has to be, if you know they're no longer over the thing, then when the ladder finally collapses, like, who cares? They're no longer over the thing.
Yeah, but it should look close, though. You should have this thing where we're almost to the edge, but are they quite enough yet? And then you find out, oh, they are.
But no, they looked like they were good, like 20 feet clear, no problem.
Yeah.
So if I had to critique this scene, it's straight out of goddamn Final Destination. Like, every single thing here felt like it was tailor-made to get someone killed. I don't know if it was Tommy Lee Jones or the homeless guy, but like everything here, from the tree falling in the exact place to block them off, to the ladder breaking simultaneous to the fire hose coming up on fire as well. This felt so artificially constructed in a movie where it's lava. Just keep having that catch stuff on fire. That's the problem. Just do that 7 times.
Yep. I will say, I do like that as it's going down the street, it does just kind of have this effect where buildings at the side just are catching on fire from it. Like the intense heat's just doing that. It made for a good visual of like just like like brimstone going down the street.
And honestly, once this sequence is done, they do kind of do what I was asking them to do. They focus on the fact of, okay, this is just destroying everything that it touches, including storefronts. We need to figure out how to stop it before it gets into like the part where a bunch of museums and like other things are. Actually, that's like super important.
There's a quick shot in this part of the movie where there's like some guys, I say guys as if they're random people, there's like guards or whoever it is, are unloading paintings into a van because like this art gallery's about to get hit. So they're like trying to get it. And there's a really weird joke here where one of the guys is putting it into the back of the van and he's like, oh man, these are heavy. And the other guy goes, yeah, it's a really heavy style that really calls on the themes of humanity. And he's like, yeah, I didn't mean it like that.
I love that joke. I thought that was hilarious. It's, again, it leans into the silliness. It's practically like an airplane style joke.
Oh,
it's just smack dab in the middle here for no reason.
Yeah, I got a chuckle out of that. Yeah, well, one of the big things they do is, so Tommy Lee Jones is trying to problem solve, and he's sort of problem solving with Anne Heche, and she's like doing the test with the basketball and seeing that the road's going to, starts slanting the other way, and it's not going to keep going, because Tommy Lee Jones's plan initially is to just try and like barricade the sides so that it stays on one singular path and just eventually gets to the ocean, basically. But she's like, no, it's going to turn here. And that's a problem because when it turns there, it's going to go towards residential areas. And there's like a real idea here of like, well, let's try and not like, I mean, it's one thing to evacuate, but it's going to leave a lot of people homeless if it goes through like residential areas. So that becomes kind of the heartfelt goal of this part of the movie, is to make sure it doesn't go that way. In fact, this is probably a good place to talk about the character of Kevin, who is a... What was that reaction?
I'm just getting ready for this because I have a lot to say on this plot.
Okay. So earlier on in the movie, there was a moment where these two cops who have been kind of around helping in this part of the movie, they're called to this neighborhood, which seems to be a primarily black neighborhood. And there's like 2 white guys who are yelling that they want to get taken back to civilization or something. We don't really get a whole lot of context, but we just see that this big guy, Kevin, who's black, obviously, has some words exchanged with these 2 cops. In particular, the one guy that's got the mustache, who's a bit aggressive with him, right? And I'm like, okay, this is an interesting thing to throw in here. But here, this part of the movie, Kevin is showing up with all this stuff, and he goes up to one of the firefighters, the chief firefighter who was like talking to Tommy Lee Jones, and he's like, hey, my neighborhood's just over here, and we've got some house fires as a result, probably because of some of the rocks that have been flying around with fire on them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, can you send some trucks over to help my neighborhood? Like, we need help. And the cop with the mustache comes up and he's like, oh, stop harassing the firefighter, give me your hands, and he like arrests him. And so there's a little bit here where he's handcuffed for a while whilst all this other stuff's going on, and ultimately, you know, it sort of fades into the background while we're doing the actual, like, how do we solve the lava and the disaster. Once they've got their plan, and we'll go back and talk about that in a minute, there's a whole bit here where, in fact, even once he's getting handcuffed, I think that's when Kevin yells out, I'm about to be the Volcano version of Rodney King. I think that's where that line comes. And that line landed with a bit of a thud, because this is definitely the first time I've watched this movie where I've known who Rodney King is, and it felt like a really weird thing to just slip into this silly disaster movie. You know, it felt like, why are we talking about this? This is really strange.
Yeah, no, and it's just to wrap up the plot on what you were saying there is, once the plan gets into action, Kevin's kind of just forced to stand off to the side because he's handcuffed. Eventually, his mouthing off basically has one of the cops say like, okay, screw this, and he uncuffs him and says, you're free to go. But then Kevin has the turn of heart of saying like, oh, well, if it's for the good of the neighborhood or whatever, I'll help out. And so he helps out the cops, and then they in turn help out him by sending a truck to his neighborhood. Yeah.
Notably, it's the other cop who's not that bad with him who uncuffs him, but it is the bald cop with the mustache who, after they've solved the immediate problem, turns to the firefighters and says, hey, send a couple of trucks over to so-and-so, there's some residential fires to take care of. And it's meant to be like a little payoff where this cop has learned, oh no, Kevin helped us out, he's a good person, I should return the favor. And his partner like taps him on the shoulder and goes, oh, you're a great guy. And I felt like, I don't know if I want to like cheer this cop. I really don't feel like I want to do that.
I don't want to cheer this cop at all. I don't know what the hell this movie was thinking. Where it's like, oh yes, okay, LA, clearly with the LAPD, has a systemic problem with racism. Obviously that's something that is just, if they want to deal with it, so be it. They want to have that subplot, I'm fine with it, if you handle it with the smallest bit of tact. But from both sides of this here, you have the Kevin representing the black neighborhood that is currently burning down. I fully understand him saying, hey, my neighborhood's burning down. Can you please get just a fire truck over there?
In a vacuum, separating from the cop stuff and what they do with it, which is obviously what everyone's going to remember about this character. Having a character from that neighborhood that this lava is going to immediately threaten if it turns, and that's why we have to stop it. Having a character to represent those people so that we understand that someone personally is invested in those people being saved is a good idea for the movie, to just make us care about that neighborhood. That part's smart, but of course what you remember is this cop stuff.
The cop stuff, and that's where I cannot believe they bungled this so horribly, of that they have him get arrested, and the movie, the tone of the movie and everybody's reaction to it makes it very clear that it thinks this cop is in the wrong. And that all the characters are like, are you really arresting a guy in the middle of all of this lava stuff? Like, what are you going to drive him downtown too? Like, what are you doing? And by the time we hit the end of this and we show that him and they're able to work together and whatnot, fine. I'm okay with that. You have this moment where it's everyone's coming together to fight against disaster, even if they don't like each other. The problem I have with it is the moment that he sends over the fire truck and the other cop says, you're a pretty good guy, because no, like 100%, whatever kind of message you were trying to send, you don't immediately dismiss all of the systemic racism of the LAPD because one guy got one fire truck sent to an entire neighborhood that is currently burning to the ground. That's not, you didn't undo racism, movie, but it felt like it was patting itself on the back by saying like, see, all we need is a natural disaster and racism will be solved.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think all of this is a bit ill-conceived, to be honest, that it doesn't really fit in this movie. But if you're going to have some version of this, I would say the better ending to it would be this cop goes to the fire chief or whoever and does all this with no one else around. The idea being that we see that he wanted to do the nice thing without like someone patting him in the back, without it being this like big thing where he gets the credit for it. That would have maybe had a bit more, I don't know, dare I say, nuance to it, where he's a bit more complex as a character now. Instead, he just comes across as the same asshole cop who just, I don't know, felt like he owed him a favor, I guess.
That's the thing. It felt like it was an owing thing. It felt like this wasn't out of him doing a good thing because it's a good thing. It was like, well, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, even if you are one of the bad ones.
He asked for this help like an hour ago. Like the houses that were burning are probably long gone.
Straight up, they're gone. There is no hope for saving that neighborhood.
Yeah, so the whole thing's a bit ill-conceived. The actual plan here, though, I do have a lot of fun with, which is like, okay, we're waiting for these, I don't even know what you call them, these big concrete blockers. That you see them on the highways where they're like blocking things off. It's these big
highway dividers.
Yeah, highway dividers. There you go. And like, hey, we're going to get a bunch of them in. He's called in all the favors to have trucks bring these in. But when the trucks show up, and Keith David's there by this point, he's a cop as well, and he's like just sort of helping Tommy Lee Jones out. But to be fair though, Keith David has gravitas, so I immediately feel like he should be in charge of things. He just has that feel to him.
Every time he barks an order, I want to obey it.
I'm like, yes, sir. Like, I'll do whatever you say, Mr. David. But they show up with these trucks, and like, wait a minute, we were expecting hundreds of these things. This could only be like, how many? It's like 82, I think was the exact number.
Yeah.
It's like, we can't, like, we're supposed to be like, making a barricade going all the way to the goddamn ocean. This is going to get us a few blocks. What the hell? And they're like, what do we do? What do we do? And Tommy Lee Jones gets the idea that as this lava is going to turn into the residential areas, and he makes a big speech as well when he's trying to inspire everyone. He's like, hey, after this street, it's no longer department stores and places that can be easily repaired by big companies. It's homes, it's people, it's livelihoods. So let's and he sort of rallies them all up, right?
We will celebrate our independence day. Wait, what?
But the plan is to double stack the big concrete dividers in a cul-de-sac, right? In a horseshoe. And the idea being that once it's all sort of built up a little bit, because they're going to have like 6 feet of height, just drop every bit of water they've got on it. And Anne Heche comes in with the science and says, yeah, maybe you'll get lucky and it'll be strong enough to make a crust in the lava, and that'll sort of make a natural endpoint for it. And that's actually something, well, she says it's something they did in Iceland at one point. I don't know if that's true, but
sure,
whatever. Like
in the universe of this movie, sure, yes, that happened.
I don't know if there's enough water to drop. I mean, I get that it hitting the ocean would like make a cut because it's an infinite amount of water basically. So at that point it would create an impact. But dropping water from helicopters and some fire hoses like in a concentrated dose, I don't know how much of an impact that would have on lava.
That's with the helicopter stuff, I could believe it more. I think that they actually did themselves a disservice, if like believability, when they said that it was 6 feet deep, because all I could think is, okay, the water's going to cool down maybe the top like 6 inches. And then you've got 5.5 more feet of still super hot rock that's just going to remelt it again. It didn't feel like it made any sense that if you drop the water from this, it's somehow going to cool the middle as well. And then add on top of it, they have blatantly shown throughout this entire thing that all of the fire hoses are completely useless in this movie. So, yeah.
But one was literally just a fire spreader at one point.
I would say get the fire hoses away from the lava. Don't let them be something that's going to blow up. That's another thing that I found interesting in this movie. When the volcano first goes off, there's a few like massive explosions. Like, of course, there's a propane truck and stuff like that.
Sure.
That they specifically show off as a big, ooh, look at that. But then later on in this, they're moving all these parked cars off to the sides of the street and using them as like barricades to the shops. But none of them explode. And I feel like the gasoline inside should still be a little bit reactive to lava.
That actually does just generally sound like no one thought of it, or they did and thought we don't want to have to deal with the fact there's all these little explosions constantly happening, so we're just going to ignore it.
I mean, it seems like a plot hole, but I'm willing to accept it because, yeah, it would be much more obnoxious that every time the lava crossed one more car, just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, so basically this plan succeeds, right? And we have a big celebration moments, but it's like 2/3 out of the movie. There's still like 30 minutes left, so it's like, oh no, this isn't the ending. There's more to go here. But they do have their big celebration moment. Everyone's happy. Dawn's kind of finally starting to hit. It's starting to light up now. So before we go on to the next part, though, we have to talk about the subway, because there's a whole subplot that's been happening throughout a big chunk of this. When the big earthquake hits, which is when the volcano actually starts to come up. Which, by the way, I always thought it was weird that there wasn't like a big shot of like the volcanoes looking quite tall at some point, like earlier on. You see it at the end of the movie when you get a big wide shot of the city, but there's no like big money shot of like, oh, now the volcano's properly like risen up through the tar pits.
Well, I think it's also one of those things where it only lasts as long as, like, the reason the volcano makes that shape is because the lava cools itself over and over again as it's coming up. So it's only once everything's said and done that you'll actually have a tall volcano.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized that's how they formed that shape, but fair enough.
I mean, they don't come up looking like, there's not just a cone waiting underneath the surface that goes, whoop.
Well,
like
I didn't think volcanoes in the real world came up from somewhere. I just assumed that they were natural mountains that had volcanic passages in them. It's
just a like if you have a fluid or something like that through like a syringe, and then you just have it keep on piling on top of itself.
It makes sense now that you explain it to me, but like I just assumed that the reason why volcanoes look like volcanoes is because they're just like they're just mountains that happen to be volcanoes, as opposed to they're made by the lava. But I guess that makes sense, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you can have mountain ranges that have lava, like magma in them, but they are a lot more unique than that.
Okay. Well, I've learned something. Not from Volcano, I learned it from you, but still, we got there in the end.
I'm helpful.
So, when the big earthquake goes off, we do one of, again, good bit of cutting around in the movie, I would say, where they cut to like this train driver coming to work, and he goes in and he's like sitting, he gets ready, and there's some passengers on the train. He's
reading a book of how to write a screenplay, which top notch there, writers. Good job.
And he's got a little mustache. He's got a bit of like a almost Super Mario kind of look to him. But he's driving the train, and then the earthquake happens, and they get trapped. The train stops moving, and they're just kind of stuck there. And they're trapped. The tunnel's not blocked, but they're trapped in the train car because the doors won't open, right? And we see that it's really hot. All the passengers are like trying to like fan themselves, like, oh god, it's like a furnace down here. What's going on? And when John Carroll Lynch's character sees that this has happened after the earthquake, and he sees this train down there, he immediately goes, all right, let's put a team together. I'm going down there. And I feel like, okay, you know what? I buy that he would feel, one, like, you've given me no reason to think that he doesn't care about the people that works for him, like, no matter how down the train is. But two, I also buy that he's guilty here because he said, oh, there's nothing unsafe about what's going on. I think in some level, he's like, I fought for everything to run as normal, and if I hadn't done that, this train wouldn't be in this position, so...
Yeah, I think one of the major themes in this movie that actually does kind of shine by the end is this idea of personal responsibility. And, like... you have to own up to your mistakes and like try to make them right regardless of how hard that may be, because obviously a volcano is nobody's fault, but it is kind of implied, especially by Anne Heche later on, that it only is so bad as it is in LA because they have been like putting in subway systems and messing with like underground stuff, which is not really safe to do in a tectonic plate sort of area.
Yeah, honestly, like, I actually had that thought at the start of the movie. I'm like, does LA really have a subway system? That feels like a stupid idea, given, because...
I'd have to assume so.
Because I know LA houses don't typically have basements because of the earthquakes, and it feels like that would be also a good idea not to have a subway system, but...
Yeah.
It is a big city, though.
Looking at it, it is there, yeah. They definitely have a subway system.
Fair enough. I guess we'll just build really thick walls and hope for the best, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's going to fail one time, and that's whenever the walls cave in. So as long as there's no trains running right then, everything will be fine.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Like, I didn't really doubt it because it feels like a really insane thing for the movie to lie. Because everyone in LA would be like, "What are you talking about? There's no train system here if it was fake." So.
That being said, apparently they only began operation back in 1990. So at the time of this movie, it still would have been rather new. Yeah.
That's interesting. So that maybe adds into like maybe they were playing into like people actually had concerns that one day there would be an earthquake that would cause a lot of problems with that.
Right. It goes back to the Towering Inferno thing of like, you're just going to keep on messing against God's will, and then eventually they'll smite you down.
Yeah. Earthquakes aren't good for skyscrapers either. I mean,
no.
You could have easily done the movie Earthquake also just set in a skyscraper and just like, here's like, oh, the skyscraper's on its last legs because of this earthquake, so people just try to get down safely.
I feel like no matter where you are, unless you're just either in the ocean or out in like an open field, an earthquake's gonna be bad. No matter where you're, like, you can set up a bad situation anywhere.
True.
As long as there's something that can fall on you.
But like an earthquake, like a tall bit, like I'm just saying, a tall bit, like you're increasing the risk, okay?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're increasing the. No, don't get me wrong. I know that places like Japan have put a lot of engineering expertise into making buildings safe. I know they do. They look scary to look at, but they're designed to wobble so that it keeps their integrity. I get it. Like I understand all of that. I still don't want to be in one when it's happening. I would freak the hell out. Okay.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Right? I live in a place that does not get earthquakes. I have literally never felt an earthquake. I was in California for 1 week. They had its chance to give me a little scare, and they didn't do it. So
you dodged the final destination. Good job.
Anyway, what was oh yes, subway.
Train. Yes.
So we finally cut to them coming down to this train car, and by the time they get there, all the passengers have passed out. They're alive, but they're all passed out from the heat, and they're getting them all out, and of course they look out the window at one point here and see that lava's coming down the tunnel, right down the subway tunnel, which of course sets up the idea just before the success in the other part of the movie that, oh wait, this lava's also moving underground. This is not all of the lava, which obviously becomes a big plot point. But they've got almost everyone out, and then John Carroll Lynch realizes, shit, we've not found the driver yet. We have to find the train driver. And he's like, I'm going back in for him. And he goes in and he's like looking for, and he finds him up the other end of the train, and he puts him over his shoulders and he's like coming down the train, but of course he's moving quite slow. The lava has already gotten to the edge of the back of the train. So he's on the train, the lava's underneath him. What's he going to do? What did we get, David? We get a leap of heroism. That's what we get. We get him sacrificing himself by jumping as far as he can. He lands in the lava. And as he's melting into the lava, he throws the train driver as far as he can so that he lands on the ground beyond the lava. And then the final shot we get of John Carroll Lynch, like he's down to like his stomach, like he's just sort of sticking it as if the lava's melted him that quickly, which maybe it would. I'm not denying it, but the shot looks amazing. And it's silly.
He raises up his hand into a thumbs up. As he goes down.
I mean, they could have done it. If they wanted to have done that joke, they could. Yeah. I promised there would be a better sacrifice in this movie than Dante's Peak.
Yeah, that's the thing. You brought that up in Dante's Peak, and I was like, all right, I'll try to guess the character beforehand. I'll be honest, I was wrong. I thought it was going to be... I tried to base my guess before like the first major earthquake happened, because I figured that was going to be the inciting incident. So at that point, my guess was still leaning towards the male geologist who never shows back up after his first introduction. So poor guess on my part.
I had to like think about that for a second. So who are you talking about? So, oh yeah, there's that guy that had one line about being on the news at the start. Yep. That's right.
I thought he was going to be like bigger in Anne Heche's plot and was going to like save either her or Rachel. No, he's gone from the movie. Yeah. But no, you are damn sure right that was a hell of a bigger sacrifice moment. Somehow like equally as corny as the one in Dante's Peak, but definitely a bigger moment.
They're both stupid scenes, but this has a man melting into lava, therefore it's more entertaining.
Like, I didn't even care that he was melting. It was the fact that he threw the guy as he was melting. That was like, if he threw him from the subway car, I'd be like, okay, fine. But as he is like turning into a pile of goo, he does this heroic throw he doesn't even have like feet to brace himself anymore. His like hip is the only thing he's able to get like tilt with here. I feel like so silly.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, it's the most unbelievable thing about it might be that he's able to keep standing upright the whole time. I feel like once your feet are in the lava, you wouldn't be able to stand anymore. You'd just collapse into it.
Oh yeah. As soon as he threw the guy, the force should have pushed him backwards, and he should have landed on his back. Absolutely. I'm reminded of I can't remember what show the joke was from, but it was something where like one character was going like feet first into a sawmill, and he's like, "Oh Jesus, what was I thinking?" And then he gets up and turns head first. He's like, "That would have hurt like a bitch." I feel like that's how he should have approached this jump at a certain point, because going feet first all the way up to your head sounds like the most painful option.
Yeah, but then he couldn't throw him. He'd be dooming the driver.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just, he throws him, and then like dip your head in the lava, man. Just lean over. End it quick.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Still though, you can't deny that he did not pay for his earlier mistakes. Like he like sacrificed himself in such an absurdly over the top way to save this guy's life, because he felt responsible. And
you could see it on, like, they spend a long time of showing him, like, as he's slowly walking up the train car, he's saying his final prayers. Like, he's saying to God, like, "Oh, Mother Mary in heaven, watch over us." And I'm like, wow, man, you could not have a more dramatic death scene for a dude who's about to die in lava.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So, yeah, and then just to jump over to what's her name, Kelly's plot here a little bit. So, the hospital's obviously overflowing. They've got like basically just like triage stuff set outside in the car park, and she's
real quick before we get to that. There's one like starting up her character arc is as they're driving there.
Oh yeah.
The dude in the car, his leg's broken. He's got like gushing blood, and Kelly's like, "Doctor lady, you might want to pull over. He's gushing blood." And Dr. Lady basically says, there's a blanket under him. Just press firm on that. I need you to do this for me. And she's very hesitant, but it is her coming up and saying, "Okay, I have to do this. I'm called to action." And so she does what she has to do, and she, I guess, keeps this guy alive for a while.
Yeah, and then she gets checked out by the doctor at the hospital, but ultimately the doctor keeps getting called away to do more serious things. People are getting into like serious shock. People are getting into whatever conditions are around. And at one point there's this little boy, and the doctor grabs the little boy and hands the boy to her and says, "Here, I need you to look after this kid." And it's like, what? And then we see later on that she's actually with like 3 kids, and she's like playing like a board game with them or whatever.
They're playing rock, paper, scissors, and that's where we got the lava line I opened up with.
And like she's keeping them entertained, and it feels like, oh, she's kind of leveling up here. She's being useful. She can't do the crisis, but there are kids running around whose parents are missing right now. Someone needs to look after these kids. This is valuable, it's a job that he's done. So she's doing it.
She's not just she's not the kid. She's not this little girl who's incapable of taking care of herself, as everyone seems to think she is. And even she seems to think that she was to begin with. She's able to come to her own and say, "Okay, in a crisis, I can handle this."
And to be fair, she does go above and beyond when the kid wanders off later on. Like, if her going after the kid does feel like, oh, it's building up to this end of her arc here where she really takes this as her responsibility, where she's like, no, she's not just going to let it. Because what she says to one of the guys when she's looking for him, "Hey, have you seen this kid go through here?" And the guy just says, "Oh, someone else will have found him. It's all right. Just going over to the safe zone." And she's like, "No, he's my responsibility." She really hits that home. It's just unfortunate when she does get to him and she realizes she's in like the middle of danger, she just freezes up completely. And Tommy Lee Jones has to run at her again to save her.
I mean, I get having the big dramatic moment. You want to converge your plots together, but like it just robs her of any development.
It would have probably been more interesting if Tommy Lee Jones sees the kid, which he does at first, and then she walks out second, and he's like, "Oh no, my daughter's like in danger." It'd have been maybe better if he saw the kid, really wanted to do something, but thought, "Oh, it's too late, and these explosives are going off." Instead, just to see her run in and grab the kid at the last second, have her just save the kid on her own, and have that be, like daughter, like father, like she's actually becoming him and like saving people.
Yeah, you have the moment where he has to essentially struggle with like the utilitarian aspect of like, trolley problem, is actively letting this one kid die, where like I could call it in and stop it, or save the entire rest of the city. And he has to make that choice, and like it seems like he's going to make it one way or the other, but then the daughter comes in and saves the day, and it's like, okay, cool, great. We got to have the best of both worlds there.
I feel like there's a few tweaks here that we've suggested that would actually just sort of like maybe not quite make it a great movie, but would actually nudge it towards genuinely good potentially if they actually did some of these things.
Look, they were in a race to try to get out before Dante's Peak, and they lost, but that doesn't mean that they weren't in a race that whole time.
So yeah, like the whole thing is that Anne Heche starts to worry that the lava's flowing somewhere else because hey, this is the first time she's ever dealt with lava in like a city with man-made tunnels. It's a kind of a different thing from the middle of Iceland or wherever we're used to seeing these things, or by a small town in northwest America. But she goes and does her own digging, goes into a tunnel and whatnot, and basically can detect, oh shit, stuff's happening here. And she tells Tommy Lee Jones and says, hey, this is all going down. This lava's flowing. They stick a camera down, like, because she wants to go down and check something, and he's like, no, it's too dangerous. He's like, I'll go. And she's like, what, and I'm going to pull you back up on my own?
Right.
No, I'll have to go. And he's like, well, we'll put down a camera. So cut to a camera being lowered into here, and we get this, like, dramatic shot of lava just coming towards the camera for, like, 3 seconds before it cuts out.
Like, the camera is on a single rope, so it's just slowly spinning.
Yes.
And it's like, there, see? No lava. Everything's fine. And then it turns to face the other direction. And it lasts for exactly 3 seconds before this lava, traveling at like 70 miles an hour, just barrels into it.
And they basically work out, based on city maps and planning and whatnot, that this tunnel it's going through ends at right next to this new skyscraper, which happens to be right next to the hospital that all these patients have been sent to the whole movie. And to be fair, right, they set this up at the start of the movie. This is where the line ended, and that's what the guy was saying, hey, we're not going to let you build any more subway line here. Like, that was set up at the start of the movie. So they did set that up. I can't deny that.
I appreciate all the setup, but once again, it feels like the lava is choosing this.
Oh, yes.
It feels like this is something that, like, should not be an option, but they have engineered the circumstances to make this chase after his daughter.
So they all get to this location, they're evacuating some of the hospital as best they can, but it's like, there's not much we can do, and once again, it's going to flow this way, not that way, because Tommy Lee Jones gets the idea that, oh, like, the aqueduct system, which is concrete, is, like, nearby. If it goes out of that, it'll just flow to the ocean, and bada bing, bada boom, we've done it. However, it's not going to flow that way, so they have to build a dam. And I love the dramatic reveal when the idea of how to make the dam comes, because it's this ridiculous shot looking up at Tommy's face, and you just see the skyscraper behind him, and then he looks ahead at a reflection and sees the reflection of it, and he's like, a dam will blow the building. And my only disappointment here is we never get a reaction from the rich guy who built this place, and he was so proud of it. Like, where's his reaction to finding out they're doing this? I almost wish there was a moment where he didn't know they were doing it, and then he just saw the building, like, the detonations going off. Like, maybe it would ruin some of the drama because the kid's out there, you might care about the kid. But I do kind of wish, like, the first couple of detonations would go off, and he would look round and be like, wait a minute, what are they doing at my building? What are they doing?
No joke, the last time we see the billionaire guy is, like, shortly before this sequence, and he's just basically bitching to his doctor wife, as you said earlier, like, why are you helping these gross poor people? Ugh, come on, let's get out of here. And she's like, no, I'm gonna do my job. And he's like, whatever, and just leaves. And then there's nothing from him. I felt like there, even if it wasn't a direct reaction to it happening, I felt like there should have been, during that little end sequence where it was showing, like, the news saying how things are calming down or whatever, just cut to him with his head in his hands, just like, oh God, I'm out $1 million.
Yeah, I just watched to see, because this is effectively his comeuppance for being an asshole, which is fine. That's a fine little movie, like, thing. If anything, this could have been played up more to be quite funny. Like, you know, if you get his reaction, maybe if not during the explosion, like, when he realizes they're going to do it, like, give me his reaction to finding out, give him trying to argue not to, and have Tommy Lee Jones just, like, stare at him blankly and be like, F off. Like, if you're going to have one F-bomb in this PG-13, you have it be that. You have a Tommy Lee Jones telling this guy to F off.
No, you know what you do? Just to really, like, bring the character full circle of, like, taking charge, taking control of the situation and all that. Anne Heche punches him in the face, knocks him out.
There you go. In fact, even because then it further plays up this idea, which is kind of here, I suppose, now that I'm thinking about it. But like, he was complaining to his wife that she's just wasting her life saving other people, and the irony is that this thing he cares about is being used to save everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, so he inadvertently ended up saving as many people as she did, arguably more.
Not that he chose it, but
no, he didn't. But you know, there's something there. But that's their big plan. They set up the charges. Gator and another guy who were setting up the explosives get trapped inside. Well, technically only one of them does. And Gator just stays back to like sort of try and help him out. And then it's like, oh, it's too late. So when they ask over the walkie-talkie, like, are you guys clear? He just says, yeah, we're clear. He sort of accepts their ending.
And then Anne Heche was told by Tommy Lee Jones, go find my daughter. She's somewhere in the hospital. Just get her out of this area. Keep her away from the blast zone. Meanwhile, the daughter just straight up loses the little boy. Like, the boy just walks away. And so she manages to follow this boy through the kitchen, down some stairs, into a parking garage, out the door of the parking garage, where, of course, the building is coming down at that moment. Yes,
and the most miraculous save in history, because Tommy Lee Jones, when he runs after her and the kid and like dives them into like a little nook in the parking area or something. So there's basically a little area with a roof that kind of protects them from the debris. It's kind of unbelievable to even survive, but it's a Hollywood movie, so they're going to.
Absolutely. The one thing that I found weird about this ending, though, is that they really laid on the fact of Anne Heche saying, I will find your daughter. Like, you can trust me. I will definitively do that. But she was like on the other side of town, basically. We see how she manages to see like Tommy Lee Jones running into the fray from probably a good, I don't know, 600, 700 feet away. It's like a good sized distance. And it just felt like that was like they were almost setting up something with how much they focused on it, and then it just completely subverted it.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, just to mention here, the shots of Tommy Lee Jones running towards his daughter whilst this building was coming down were all the worst shots in the movie. They all look terrible. I don't know what to say. Just really bad green screen, really bad CG, I guess, at one point. It's kind of hard to tell what they were doing, because they all just look so blurry that it was hard to tell what the effects were in terms of like the type of effects. But regardless, there was some dodgy stuff going on there.
I mean, that's the problem, is that it should have been a very fast thing, but everything was in like super slow motion, and it really drawn it out so that you could really appreciate the fact of, oh, this doesn't look good at all.
It's actually, there was a kind of a trend with a lot of movies, like when they were coming out in Blu-ray. So like movies came out back in the day in DVD, in fact at this point VHS as well, but they'd use the original poster art, right? So you got this just this shot of the volcano in the city, and it says Volcano, nice and simple, it's a decent poster, whatever. But there was a lot of movies when it came to coming out again in Blu-ray where the studios for some reason felt the need to have different art for the Blu-ray to differentiate it from the DVD. Especially the sort of the catalog titles, which are basically movies like Volcano, where they're not a big deal. Some people vaguely remember it. They'll sell a few copies, but it's not like a big classic like Alien that gets the love treatment, right? So you'd get a lot of movies where, we're going to get some Photoshop new cover just for the Blu-ray, and the cover for the Blu-ray of Volcano is a really bad Photoshop of this moment where it's Tommy Lee Jones running, and there's just like grey debris around him, and it says Volcano at the top, and it's just like a really shitty image that they did for the Blu-ray that just does not look good at all.
Oh yeah, I see that. Ugh. Yeah. That's like, I get it, especially whenever it came out. It feels like it's trying to imitate the trends of like Olympus Has Fallen sort of style, but no, it just looks like crap.
Oh, my least favorite of that actually is there's a really good movie starring Maggie Gyllenhaal and James Spader called Secretary, which is sort of an erotic kind of coming of age drama, if you want to call it that. But the character is even called Mr. Grey, right? So there's a lot of obvious comparisons to make. This came out way, way before those books were ever thought of. But there's like a new poster for it, which is what they show when they're like putting it on streaming services now, and it's made to look like a 50 Shades of Grey movie, like, for the cover. That. And it's like, this is shameless. And it's so annoying because it's such a good movie as well. And the original poster for that movie is great. It's like just a simple, like, kind of sexy shot of legs to kind of give you the idea of what the movie's about. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they did numerous different audience tests and side-by-side things, and they found that one worked out better.
Oh yeah, because the sexy legs were never going to draw anyone in.
They thought they were going to be watching A Christmas Story. They thought it was the lamp.
Anyway, I just these shots have not aged well. Once this is all over, though, it seems to have worked. The lava flows down the ducts, and it's kind of cheesy. I kind of like, though, how it intercuts it finally hitting the ocean, because that's the real sort of, like, you know, confirmation this is over. Right. To the moment that Tommy Lee Jones is discovered to be alive, because they're all worried that him and his family are dead. Well, him and his daughter and this random kid are dead. Yeah. And they intercut, like, you know, Anne Heche seeing them be okay as the water is getting hit by the lava. I do appreciate the amount of steam coming off of it, though. That made a lot of sense to me.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. It would be immediate sublimation of all the water there. But my problem with it is that it's so obviously stock footage of, like, some other volcanic eruption. Like, this isn't something where they use the special effects to imitate the water hitting the lava. They were like, that's it too much. We can't get that sort of interaction going in our special effects sequence, so we're just gonna take whatever came out of Iceland and throw it in the movie.
There is there's definitely some close-ups and stuff they added in, but and they've obviously sort of like matted it into, like, the backdrop of Los Angeles, so they have altered it, right? It's not just like it's because it would look very obvious if it was just suddenly, you know, the edge of Iceland. Right. So, but yeah, I know what you mean. Like, that part of it is clearly just taken from, you know, a real bit of footage. But you can actually see the volcano in the distance in the background, and so which I actually really like, because it gives you this sense of the distance that it's moved through the city. Oh yeah, since it erupted. They do a bit here as well where Keith David's got the little kid, and he's like, "Hey, can you spot your mum? Can we find your mum?" And the kid looks around, and everyone's covered in not only ash, but in, like, because of the building coming down, everyone's just covered in dirt and, you know, dust and whatever like else. Rubble, concrete. Remains, so everyone's just covered in, like, a sort of grey coat of, you know, dirt, effectively. And the kid has this little moment where he's like, they all look the same. And, like, all these faces are looking up, and they're all covered in this grey suit. And then maybe the most unrealistic thing in the whole movie is it starts raining.
Yeah. That's fair.
That's the true miracle, is that, like, LA gets a few days of rain a year or something like that. They got it today. I mean, it would have been more helpful when the volcano was coming up, just to try.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're like, oh, thanks, God, making fun of us.
But at least it gets to wash off all the dirt. They all get to be cleansed, and they're born again. Which,
again, I don't think you know what you're doing with your anti-racism metaphor here, movie, because you have the moment where you're saying, look, everyone looks the same, and the way they're shooting it actually somewhat hits pretty powerfully. I think that it does a decent job of showing, like, yeah, no, look, when everyone comes together, it doesn't matter, you know, your skin type or anything like that. Everyone is just all the same, and we're just trying to make it through. But then to immediately have all of them rain, they just wipe off their faces. It just felt like the movie was saying, like, yeah, but no, there is a difference between races here. We can't ignore that. It didn't feel like a rebirth to me. I know you were saying the rebirth line. No, it didn't feel like a rebirth to me.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because I didn't even really think this was a race moment, to be honest.
I felt like that was overt, but okay.
I thought the point of this was more just that everyone had came together to solve the problem, rather than being a direct tie to the earlier race stuff in the movie. I think the race stuff in the movie stopped the second that cop was off camera. This to me felt more like, no, I can't recognize my mother because everyone looks the same because we've all been through this together. And then the rain washes them clean.
I get what you're saying, but it's the fact that, like, they specifically hang on it, and it's played as, like, this extra moment thing. Like, if it were just, oh yeah, everyone looks the same, and it seems like it's a coming together sort of moment, I can get that, but I guess it's maybe specifically because of the early racism plot that I feel like it was really leading in on that.
This felt separate to me. I didn't think this was specifically about that, which is why, to me, the rain thing didn't play poorly. I do think it's like I don't know if the movie's earned this sort of serious, dramatic moment where we kind of contemplate that we've all been through hell together. Because to me, this felt more at the end of a war movie where it's like, oh, we've all been through together. And no one else will understand what we've been through. You know, it's the end of the Lord of the Rings. Like, no one will understand that walk to Mordor. I mean, I understood it. I was just really bored the whole time, for the record. But
Yeah.
oh, we need to do the Lord of the Rings movies, David. They announced a new goddamn Gollum movie in like 2026. I'm upset about it.
I'm sure we'll get there. I'm sure it's on the list.
It's upset me now. It's upset. Anyway, so look, I can see why you're reading it that way, and I feel like if we ask people, I can see a lot of people siding with you on this. And the truth is that the way it handled the stuff earlier makes me think there's definitely a room for error here where I could be wrong, and this wasn't intentionally meant to be specifically talking about, we're all the same. But because it's so far removed from that earlier stuff, which was specifically tied to a couple of different characters, it just felt weird to have it pinned on this kid here at the end. So
I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I think them putting it here as like between Keith David and this kid who have had A, zero interaction up to this point, but also B, no interaction with a racism subplot. I think it's weird as hell. But I also felt that it was so overt. That's what made it so weird. That it was just randomly popping up here at the end as if it was the moral of the movie all along.
I didn't get that. I definitely didn't get that. I can see what you're saying and why it might be an awkward attempt at that. To me, I just got, oh no, we've all been through this. We're all equal in this. And then, the rain washes it off. I mean, arguably you could say, okay, they've got a black cop holding a white child and, well, we're all the same. Like, maybe that is feeding into, like, talking about that as a subject.
Right.
Honestly, though, either way, like, the movie doesn't have the gravitas to really do that anyway. So, and maybe that's the problem here. Maybe the reason why I never even thought they were doing like a race commentary thing here at the end was because like it landed so poorly earlier on. I just couldn't fathom that this was even another attempt at going back to that subject.
Back for seconds.
Yeah. So, anywho, Don Cheadle shows up and says, hey, the mayor and the governor and the chief of police are all on the line. They want to talk to you about all these, like, there's fires, there's mudslides, all this knock-on effect of everything that's happened today. And he's like, nah, you know what? You can handle it. I'm on vacation with my daughter. And then Anne Heche says, I've got a car. Do you want a lift? So she's going to go and spend family time with these two, apparently.
Yeah. I was kind of disappointed because Don Cheadle didn't really have an arc here. Like, he stepped up to the plate. He did his own thing.
Well,
but
actually, I'll argue something a little bit, actually. So, they constantly joke about who he wants Mike's job, right? And he's constantly bringing up and making jokes about sleeping at his desk and whatever. And when Mike doesn't come in after the big earthquake, he comes in his hat and everyone's making fun of his hat. He gets kind of bossy and says, oh, that's a pink slip and that, do this. Yeah. In a jokey way, he's not like an asshole, but he's got to, like, playing it up. Later in the movie, he realizes what Mike's plan is to like try and feed the lava to the aqueduct to get to the ocean, and he's like, "Oh man, I want to be like Mike." I do feel like there's moments, particularly when he thinks Mike's dead, and there's another moment as well that it came to me, but there was almost like he never realized the pressure he'd be under actually, because he's effectively doing Mike's job, and I think there's definitely a moment where he's hoping Mike's alive, and it's not just because he wants his friend to be alive. It almost felt like, maybe I'm not ready to take this chair. Maybe it's Come on,
that's
Mike.
That's what I wanted in that last moment, because Mike passes it off and says, like, you take care of it, Emmett. And Emmett's like, sure thing, I'm on it. And he takes up the hall and he's happy to take the job. I kind of wanted him to turn back and be like, okay, but you better be back here on Monday when your vacation's done. Like, I wanted him to like realize that this job is not as, just glamour. It's not something that is like something that should be like that he's aiming for because he thinks it's cushy. It's actual murder on him to get this done.
Yeah, although I'm sure when all these aspirations were in his head, like yesterday, he never thought for a second the volcano would pop up in the middle of the city. He never saw that coming. No one did.
No, he was completely set. He had all of his plans laid out for another riot. For earthquake stuff. Never a volcano.
I want to slightly compliment as well that Anne Heche and her colleague, while they put forth the idea that, this could be caused by a fissure and lava coming up, this isn't like Dante's Peak where they're like, oh, no, this is definitely happening. We have to be on alert immediately. They still are of the opinion they have to go down and like check it out. Like, they never go through like an arc here where they're like, oh, this is definitely happening and you aren't listening to us. Like, not really. Like, even Tommy Lee Jones gets a little bit skeptical when they even suggest it, but they're not like, oh, this is definitely what's going on right now. They're just like, it's a possibility, it's a slim chance, but we're going to have a look.
I think I would appreciate that more if they gave alternatives.
Sure.
But it's the only thing they give, which makes it feel like they are pretty sure about it.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. But, I mean, the writer couldn't think of any alternatives, so...
Right. That's like, at the beginning of the movie, they're just like, oh, it's a steam pipe or something like that. And then they keep bouncing between whether or not it's a steam pipe. Meanwhile, the geologist is just like, sounds like you're describing lava.
Actually, again, we are complimenting the editing at the start of this movie a bit, and I want to point another one here, is that right around the time they're having this conversation, it cuts to the doctor lady treating the guy who survived, and they're talking about the burns and the clothes, and she's like, wait, this steam couldn't have caused this burn. Like, they kind of like intercut it so that you're getting pieces of evidence from other characters that suggest, oh no, they're onto something. So I do think that's at least well constructed in that sense.
Oh yeah, for the audience, that's a great way to get this exposition across outside of the news guys just talking and talking and talking.
And because it's bouncing around different characters, all sort of feeding part of the puzzle, it makes it all feel quite alive. Like we're bouncing around like a really busy city, and there's a lot of happening people that are all sort of have these busy lives and jobs, and they're constantly about doing things and whatnot.
Yeah, no, I really, honest to God, as much as I hate what the plot becomes, I really like the fact that they had just a completely separate neighborhood, one that was not on this main street, and it was also facing problems caused by this. Because it would have been so easy to have the plot just be 100% laser focused on lava is the problem, how do we stop it? But instead they decided to branch out and say, no, it's going to cause other fires around the area. How do we deal with that? And they even made the point of saying that like the palm trees that line the streets were all just catching each other on fire, like as it went down. Yeah, that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I guess I think what we're saying here is that the writing craft of this movie and the editing craft of putting it together, although the direction is nothing special, I would say, and I think some of the ways it handles some of the big moments points out the weakness of the director, to be honest, but I would say that the edit and the writing and the way certain plot points come together are an example of the craft of the filmmaking, at least from those elements, are pretty solid enough. Better than maybe you would think, given how silly the movie's actual concepts are. So there's kind of this like weird push and pull of like where the quality is. And the quality overall isn't that high because of all the things that are silly, because of characters that are kind of goofy, because of like an attempt at commenting on what would have been relatively recent, like racism, like world news or local news at least at the time. So, like those attempts feel a bit weird, and it kind of felt like, hey, the city's okay. Like we don't have a problem in this city with that kind of thing. Yes, you do. Like stop pretending that you don't.
Yeah. Well, that's what it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning. Is that it feels like the city's propaganda. It feels like this is something where it's okay. LA has gone through a lot. Let's have a movie where it goes through a lot, but then comes out good on the other side, so we can just kind of say that LA's going to be okay.
And the fact that you end with a song that says "I love LA" literally in the song, as everyone's cheering because the city was able to come together and beat this thing. Like, I get why some of that just happens naturally with the concept, but it does kind of feel like they're really laying it on thick about this is a movie about saying, hey, LA is a great place, and we everyone's like patriotic duty to come together and save everyone else like really happened and whatnot.
Right.
And that feels a bit shallow.
It's basically exactly what happened with New York after 2001. Like all movies featuring New York for the next 3-4 years after that were just New York comes together. You fight with Spider-Man, you mess with all of us, sort of thing.
That doesn't feel as cynical though, because that actually was like a genuine tragedy that wasn't like that wasn't glossy. That was actually celebrating real people trying to be heroes in the real world, as opposed to this trying to be like, oh, the riots and Rodney King. Like these are things that people in the city did. Whereas 9/11 was like, oh no, this is a tragedy that something external happened to the city, and it's like celebrating, even though it's a bit cheesy at times, absolutely was, but like at least it came from a sort of nicer place of celebrating good people who were trying to do good things in the worst of times. Whereas this is about glossing over really awful people doing bad things in a systemic level. So it's very, I get what the comparison is completely valid, but there's a very, very different like genesis of each thing.
Oh yeah, going into it, but like the end result ends up the same as like, no, this city can do something.
Yeah. So yeah, and interesting stuff for sure. So yeah, and there's definitely characters that ultimately don't amount to much. The doctor lady just because... I mean, you see her smiling at the end in the rain,
That's a character arc. She can
her.
smile in the rain now.
She got rid of that shitty husband, so she's happy now.
Yep.
God. If they really wanted to ham it up, they could have been like had him try to argue with everyone that he won't let them take down their building, and then have her come up and like just like hit the charge herself, being like, "Shut up, you idiot," and be like,
That's what I'm saying. As much as they never interacted at all before this, I want to see Anne Heche punch this guy in the face. Like, it just seems right to me. She's such a firebrand character. I just want to see it happen.
Actually, it would kind of work in a way because in the early scene where they were kind of like, there was a little bit of friction between her and Tommy Lee Jones, and and even though they kind of liked each other, she said, "Oh no," he said, "You two can't go down there. That's a job for men. You're too sensitive." That's not exactly what she said, but she was basically sort of mocking him as if he was being too protective. Right. And I do actually think there's something to the idea that that's actually true in the case of this guy who was trying to like force his wife to quit the job that she clearly trained her life to be, because he doesn't like the idea of her treating people he doesn't approve of, and whatnot. He's actually trying to like change who she is and like tell her what she can do. So it might actually thematically make sense for Anne Heche to want to punch him if she actually interacts with him by the end, because that's actually something that she would be against. But
she's very much against the controlling machoism.
Yeah, so we're offering all these little things that would improve and maybe inch it towards being a good movie. As it is, I kind of like it. It's entertaining.
I was going to say, Pete, they left this open on a theoretical cliffhanger of the volcano is still active. We can have it erupt again. So brace for volcanoes coming in 2026.
I don't think that's going to happen somehow. Having said that, if Twisters makes a shit ton of money, maybe they will. Maybe they will do something crazy. Yeah. Maybe the daughter now is like the head of OEM. You know, she's in her 40s.
I mean, you just know that she's going to call up Tommy Lee Jones and be like, "Dad, I don't know what to do. I'm frozen. What do I do?" Or
they'll flip it and he'll be in a wheelchair now and he'll be trapped in front of the lava.
Yeah.
To be fair though, like they have to call it an active volcano. It literally just erupted. As far as I know, a volcano just can't be classed as dormant seconds after it's erupted. Like that'd be stupid.
Well, yeah, probably not. Hold on, I want to see when Mount St. Helens was marked as dormant. Dormant.
And I get that there's more that goes into, because I'm sure there's other things that they like take into account when they're declaring something dormant, because there's volcanoes that have not erupted in a long time that are technically active.
Oh, never mind. Mount St. Helens is still active, technically.
There you go.
So, I'm pretty sure it has to be active as well. If they ended that and said dormant, I think that would have just been like the last little, what? Do you understand anything about volcanoes movie?
No, it's just like, it could happen again. I feel like what you do in this case, though, is you extend this aqueduct right up to where the tar pit is, and the idea is that you build a big wall around it so that it'll just always funnel to the duct, and it'll just go to the ocean. Like, you plan for it now. You plan for it.
Oh, yeah, no, the very next thing LA is going to do is redirect all their infrastructure towards A, rebuilding parts of the city, and B, digging out a straight trench from the volcano to the ocean.
Absolutely. And that just, that's what it is.
Yep.
So, all right, I think we talked for 2 hours about Volcano. What are you rating Volcano to?
I don't know. We also talked about how the sun rises in Scotland and a couple other things. But yeah, no, I think that this is pretty blanket 6.5 for me. Like I said, it's better than Dante's Peak. I gave that one a 5.5. And I think that I think it benefits from leaning into the silliness of it, because there are points in this movie where I should, if I just looked at it on paper, disliked what they were doing in the same way that I disliked parts of Dante's Peak. But because they went just so bonkers with it at times, that I think they really made it work better than what was just on the paper itself. And then add on top of that, I think people have always kind of liked what I've called competence porn. The idea of someone's able to come in and just have control of a situation, and they are just able to direct this stuff. And Tommy Lee Jones does a fantastic job of this throughout, to the point where when he finally is unsure of what to do, you feel it. That's like the first time as an audience member when I felt anything for Tommy Lee Jones through this, because he just didn't know what to do next. So yeah, 6.5, just shy of like actual good marks, but still very decent.
Yeah, I feel like I have to go 6 because I like it more than Dante's Peak, and I did still give that a 6 because I still have some entertainment value in it, and I think this is a bit better. It's just more entertaining. Is it objectively better in like quality? I mean, before I watched it, I just said probably not. Although us talking about the way it like cuts around delivering its exposition early on, I do actually think there's some decent skill there. There's some decent choices being made about how to present the information. But obviously, there's duds as far as characters go. There's plot lines that aren't really explored all that much. You've got all the silliness of some of the situations they get themselves into. Some of which is for, more entertainment value, admittedly, but not always. So, yeah, 6.5 for me as well. And yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia kind of tacked onto it. It's not again, we're on a bit of a curve here, right? Not all 6.5s are created equal. Just pointing that out. You just have a feel for it. It's something in the gut. You can't explain it.
But
as soon as the movie started and that little bit of music started up, and it was like, we're going around the city showing everyone and like setting the scene of like everyone thinks it's a quiet sunny day in Los Angeles. Nope. Hell's coming to Frogtown.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's the movie.
Well, we need to decide, is it making the cut? I
don't think so.
If I have to go first, I think if Dante's Peak is cutting it close, this is like the opposite side of cutting it close. I think it's almost there.
I just don't think it's actually good enough to say it makes the cut. Because it isn't, right? It's still a dumb movie. It's still silly. It's arguably sillier than Dante's Peak, obviously, in a lot of ways. Even though that's why it's maybe more entertaining at times. So, yeah, I will say, yeah, Tommy Lee Jones way more competent than Pierce Brosnan. That's all I'm saying.
No arguments there.
All I'm saying. So, that is the movie. If you enjoyed the show, you can get more. I mean, David, obviously, we have Collector's Cut most weeks. We have the Atomic Cinema Experiment, the Sci-Fi Movie Podcast most weeks. We've just been doing, big new releases like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and Furiosa, amongst other things. So go check out that. But of course, you can get bonus shows every month over in Patreon. We do 2 monthly shows there as a pair. We have the Criterion Cut, where we do movies from the Criterion Collection. And we also do extra reels, where we do some of the worst movies of all time. If those sound appealing, you want to support all the content and help keep it coming, I would not be able to keep doing this and put all the shows out that I do if it wasn't for people supporting on Patreon or YouTube memberships and things like that. So thank you very much, everyone who does. And of course, any liking, subscribing, sharing things out, all of that does help as well. So that is the show. We will see you next week for some more disasters from the 90s. We're doing something a little bit different. We're doing Daylight, which is the trapped in a tunnel movie where, again, you just coined a new phrase, the competence porn. What did you call it?
Yep, competence porn. Yep.
Yep. Well, Sylvester Stallone is going to be the competent stud of Daylight. So,
all right,
brace yourself.
I'll take it.
But that is the show. This has been Collector's Cut. Thank you very much for joining. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.